Hey guys, welcome to Now That's Debatable. This is your host, Fantastic Facade. I am joined with my trusty co-host, AAA the Humanist, as normal. Today, we have the dynamic duo that is the Canadian Atheist and his co-host, Dean. Michael and Dean joining us today. We're going to be talking about morality and other things probably, but the focus is going to stick around morality. How's everybody doing today, guys?
Really good.
Going with
Yeah, the first thing I have to say is, Dean gets invited back all the time. I never get invited back. So thank you so much for having me back. It's nice to go. Yeah, I'm just messing around. But yeah, it's great to be back. Had a great time. Was it 2 weeks ago now? A couple weeks ago with Wes, and looking forward to perhaps another conversation, including perhaps Justin as well. But it was great. I shared it around, so hopefully it drove some more people over to you, and I shared the conversation for tonight as well. So hopefully it does the same. Keep the conversation going. And as you can tell, I got verbal fucking diarrhea. I never shut up. So Dean, start saying something, man.
Gotcha.
Well, thanks for having me on as well. I know that Michael's been here before, but thanks for having me on. I try and make my way over to our own podcast as often as I can, but even that is few and far between. So I'm happy to be here today.
Yeah, fair enough. We have chat live up on the screen. If I see anything come in that's not completely irrelevant or seems like it might be interesting, I will bring it to the attention of the group, because obviously I'm streaming it. I see it before everybody else does, but you can watch it live if you're viewing the channel. You'll actually see live chat on the screen, so our guest can't actually see it unless they're watching a stream of the video, which I don't recommend because of echo and all that stuff. But I do have live chat up. If you have any questions, please feel free to shoot them out in chat, and we'll get to those if I think they're relevant or important. If you're Wes Curry, who's been on our show before a couple times, and you start your rant, I'm just going to ignore you as normal. So, without further ado, morality. So I think the reason that we wanted to have this conversation amongst everybody is because I think we have some bridging to do between moralities here. And I think AAA actually came up with this current version that I've adopted and accepted and have been able to defend well. But just out of curiosity, stances, generally speaking, generic stances on morality, what are your thoughts?
Dean, you go first.
Well, Michael and I have pretty much also agreed on our stance on morality. For as far as I'm concerned, it's and Michael back me up on this. It's reduction in harm. That is the basis of all morality. Whatever actions or that you can take to reduce harm, that is a moral thing to do.
Yeah, and I would say, like, to suss out just a little bit more, like the reduction of harm to the best of our ability, right? Because you're going to vaccinate our kids, even though it hurts them. The promotion of flourishing to the best of our ability.
Okay, I'm glad you said that. I was about to ask a question. You said reduction of harm, but promotion of flourishing. That made you just
and trying to limit the involuntary imposition of our will onto other conscious creatures.
You said promotion.
Yeah, and that's pretty much that's the thing, and it's really interesting. I'm really glad to be having this conversation too, because we talk to so many people all the time about, well, yeah, as an atheist, where do you get your morality? I'm like, well, one has nothing to do with the other, right? I mean, like, people talk about the different prongs on a fork, right? Well, atheism is a chopstick. It's just one thing. It's your stance on God's nothing else. Your morality has nothing to do with that. You can be, you could be, a serial killer and still be an atheist. Like, it's got nothing. One's got nothing to do with the other.
Right. So
yeah, atheism is a stance on one issue, whether there are gods or God or gods. That's it. It's got nothing to do with anything else.
Yeah, and a conversation that AAA and I have had, just to kind of piggyback on that before we dive a little deeper, because I see AAA's raring at it already, but just something to kind of piggyback on that is that the conversation that I've had with, like, infinite number of Christians that I've talked to since deconversion, and even prior to, I think the reason, and it's a conversation that AAA and I have had, and it's maybe something that you guys have recognized or even, kind of come to your own conclusion of, but it's something that I like to point out for anyone that maybe hasn't thought about it, is that Christians especially, because they're the people I spend my most time talking to, but they look at atheism and they say, well, you can't have morals because you don't have God, like you were just saying, like they're nothing to do with each other. But the reason for that is because their moral system is dictated to them by their God. And so without a God, you don't have a moral system. And if you think about it that way, it gets really, really simple. It's simple for Christians, it's simple for their God, it's simple for them to believe it, and it's simple for them to dismiss you having your own moral system. But what that does is it means that you don't have to think. And that's okay too. Like, it just, hey, I don't care. I don't actually have to work out what I believe. I got told this by this omniscient being in the sky. Therefore it is. Whereas I think atheists and people who don't have this omniscient being that they worship or giving them this moral code have a lot more work to do, and it's a lot more effort. And it's definitely not the easy way out, but I think that just puts us in a better position to defend it once we have to. Whereas otherwise, you're just stuck on God said so. Well, God told people to murder a whole bunch of people, and you're fine with that, right? Like,
The irony is that they think they've got all, like you said, all the work done for them, and they think they have this objective moral standard when it's really just. It's just dictated, right? Yeah. And I've heard AAA talk about this a couple of times over the past few streams, and it's something that I've started to think about more, and I'm trying to find ways to incorporate it into discussions that I'm having. And that is I think it was AAA. It might have been the conversation with Justin and Wes a few weeks back, maybe 6 weeks or so back, where you said the idea, and it's true because I've heard William Lane Craig talk about this, right? He's somewhat infamous now for saying in his conversation with Christopher Hitchens several years ago, without God, you don't have objective moral values and duties, which is just, it's a contradiction. Mm-hmm. Because the idea of, and if you're using typical definitions, right? So a typical definition of objective is mind or stance independent. And if God is a subject, and I don't think anyone would disagree with God being a subject, like an entity that makes decisions and has thoughts, then by definition, it is subjective. They don't like that.
Yeah. I mean, a God basically just says that we're giving control to the person with the biggest guns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big stick morality, yeah.
Yeah. It says, hey, this person has the most power, therefore we're going to do what he says. That's it.
Are you guys old enough to remember a show called Wait Till Your Father Gets Home?
I have never heard of it, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think it was just a Canadian show. Dean, I don't know if you're not old enough either. But anyway, there was basically this mom would be at the house and a bunch of kids would come home from school. The kids would be in the house fucking around. And it was just wait till your father gets home. And dad had to come home and be the heavy. He was the disciplinarian. And I've likened that to the whole thing. It's like, it's that big stick morality, wait till your father gets home. I'm going to tell God on you.
Yep. Yeah, but I think it's a very good analogy, and like we've pointed out before, and I'm sure you guys have pointed it out to many conversationalists, is that God doesn't change to objectivity because it's just subject to what God says. And I think it actually causes Christians more problems than they realize, because you have things like interpretation of Scripture, you have things like divine revelation and direct revelation that they all claim to believe and to say that exist, where God has spoken directly to people in the Old Testament and told them to go in and wipe out entire camps, including women and children. And I brought it up to several conversations with people on the show and just in private conversation, where I say, well, what if God commands that now? Isn't that still a moral act? Because you say that your morals stem from God. Like, so if God commands,
which one of Euthyphro are you going to choose?
Yeah. And I point that out with like Son of Sam, or like like a serial killer, or even someone like Hitler. What if I said like God directed Hitler to do this? Like how are you going to argue otherwise?
Well, the whole thing is depending on what your stance is. If you're Arminian or Calvinist, if you're Calvinist, that was the plan all along.
Yeah, of course it was.
It was always going to be that way.
And if not,
Holocaust
it's free
was
will.
always going to happen.
Yeah, and if not, it's free will.
I don't like coming out of reform camp myself because I was 5-point Calvinist, and so there was this contradiction in the system that Fasada actually pointed out. We were talking to some precept, and I don't remember who it was. It may have been Wes. It may have been Pastor Ainsley. I don't remember, but he had said that morality is based upon God's nature, and God's nature doesn't change, right? And so Fasada had asked, what if God commands someone to kill someone else? Would it still be moral? And he said that God doesn't. He says that when God was telling people to do that, or in like killing people, way back in the day, or when he had slavery back then, it was acceptable then because they were under a different covenant. So, but the contradiction is, if morality is based upon God's nature, then the covenant shouldn't matter.
Yeah, Malachi 3:6, I the Lord do not change.
Yeah, right. So whatever covenant you're in with God, the morality shouldn't change since it's based off of His nature. It's a total contradiction. And also, like covenant theology, it allows for moral relativism, where Israel could do certain things, but we couldn't because we're under a different covenant. For instance, slavery is immoral to us. It was acceptable to them because of the covenants. So. Yeah, they're running into a bunch of problems. They think they have this intrinsic morality. They don't. It's not even. I would say it's not even a moral system at all. It is an arbitrary list of shalls and shall nots. You couldn't look at this non-system and make new moral evaluations on it because it just doesn't provide. It's not a framework. It's just a list of what you can and can't do. That's all it is.
Yeah, and what do the first 4 commandments have to do with morality?
Right.
That's what I was saying to Wes, like the last time. They're just basically, I'm a god. Don't piss me off, or I'll squish you like a fucking bug. Right. that's all it is. Right. I'm God. Wait till your father gets home. Well,
right.
I'm God, and don't believe in any other gods.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We'd like to get people on.
When it goes to the other stuff, like I think it's in 2 Thessalonians, where it's talking about people who don't know God, and there's one passage in Thessalonians that talks about people who were worshiping other gods, right? So it's like you put these rules together because there were other gods people were worshiping, right?
Yeah,
and
we
so
actually want to try to
they come
get
up with
people on the
this other
show.
list because we got to get the franchise together, just our God.
Yeah, we actually want to try to get a show together with like a Christian and talk about polytheism in the Bible, because I think it's a pretty interesting topic, and I think the Bible kind of strongly alludes to polytheism, not just in the Trinitarian sense, if you're in that camp as well, but also in the sense of like God makes commands specifically about other gods, like don't have other gods before me. He mentions other gods specifically being worshipped and doing things of like what we would call supernatural ability. And so we see this like throughout the Old Testament. We even have mention of it in the New Testament, where you're talking about more modern gods such as the Roman gods, but still we have God making rules around other gods as if those gods are real, not as if they're some idol, but as if they're
right, because when he says thou shalt not have any other gods before me, the next commandment is thou shalt not make for yourself a graven image.
Yeah.
Right.
So
it's
not,
we're not talking about something to worship.
There's
necessarily.
there's
we're
a god and there are
gods.
idols.
Yeah.
Right. This is something separate. So if there is no other god, why ban other gods being in your presence?
Exactly.
Right?
So what I was just about to say. It's like there has to be other gods if he's telling you not to believe in them.
Right. Yeah. There's no reason to make a law forbidding the impossible. Like exactly. I told my daughter, hey, don't use your heat vision inside the house. Right. It makes no sense. Right.
Right. You burned the last place down.
Right.
Don't do it again.
I got to get to meat of the discussion. So, and I was listening to your conversation with Wes, and I think you had said that morality is a social contract.
Yeah.
Okay. Could you elaborate on what you mean by that?
So it's my belief that so a couple 100,000 years ago, when Homo sapien kind of first started to coalesce, when they started to realize, hey, if we just stay in one place, the animals come back around. and we don't have to be nomadic and follow them around. I think as Homo sapiens first started coming together, they started to realize that working together was a good thing. And I think this is true because we see it in other ape species like chimpanzees. Like, like I was saying, like chimpanzees they won't put up with that shit in their camps either. They will expel individuals.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it started to come from. And I think because I don't think any of us can know this, but as the societies came together and coalesced and they started to build up rules around these things. Okay, if we're going to have this thing, if you've ever gone camping with more than one person, you've kind of set up campsite rules, right? And so that on a grander scale.
So do you think, are you a moral realist?
Yeah. So I waver on this a little bit. I'm a little agnostic, but I think there are some real morals that do exist. Yes.
Okay. So because like if morality is a social contract, then I would say that it sounds like you wouldn't be a moral realist.
Yeah, and that's why I said that I waver on it.
Gotcha.
I'm still sitting on the fence.
Okay. So like for instance, like what if it sounds almost as if that, like, if morality is a social contract, you could say that something would be morally permissible if society deemed it so. Like, for instance, what if society decided that they wanted to allow slavery?
Well, that's just it. 200 years ago,
right? So
that's fine.
Would slavery then be moral?
No, because it breaks the other part of my system of morality, because you're unjustly you're imposing your will on someone who doesn't consent, and two, you're causing harm and you're not promoting flourishing. So it would break those parts.
Right. So what is that part of the social contract as well?
Yeah. I think those are all things. Like, for example,
and what if society decides that they don't care about an involuntary imposition of will?
Well, we've had societies that have done that.
Would you say then that it's moral?
No, because I think we have to zoom out and take a broader view at it, right? So as a species, right? So there have been societies that have decided, I don't care what you talk about, Genghis Khan or Alexander the Great or any of these other despots that wanted to go in and kind of take over areas and stuff like that, right? And there were people that fought against that type of tyranny. So it's not necessarily on a smaller scale. You really have to zoom all the way out and look at it from a species perspective.
Okay, but so because if you
don't do that, then my system breaks.
Gotcha. Because when I asked about like slavery, like you said, it violated this other principle, and it sounds like this principle. And forgive my quasi-religious language, but it sounds like you have a principle that transcends society in a way. You said like society could not agree that slavery is now moral because it violates the imposition of will or a reduction of harm. But if society has the ability to overturn those as well, in that sense, then morality would truly be relative. It'd be whatever the society decides it is.
Oh, said my internet connection was unstable for a second. Sorry, guys. So that's interesting. So I think that would, and I like the way you explain that. I think that would push me more towards where I'd have to, I'd have to do a little bit of re-examination, because I think that those things do. I think that the things that I mentioned, right, the reduction of harm and promotion of suffering. I don't know. I guess I haven't decided whether or not I think that those are baked in, if they are kind of transcended things. It's an interesting thought.
So I'll tell you how the way I do it. So like I consider well-being, and what was ironic, like when you were talking to Wes, like we use some of the same language, and like for me, well-being is a term that defines our experience, and our experience consists of a lot of things, right? It consists of your health, your wealth, your happiness. It consists of your security, like your safety, And then there could be some other things as well. But as far as I can tell, anything that I could think of fall within those parameters. So when I say something's wrong, I'm saying that it violates your well-being. If it does not violate your well-being, it is not immoral.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. And so it gives me an objective standard that is not contingent upon society.
So that's interesting. And I specifically remember this part of the conversation because you got talking about the idea of somebody stealing a loaf of bread, where it would still be immoral. But I think that I said
it would be justified immoral.
Yeah, that's right. I remember you saying that now, and it's funny because it gave me pause to think to think then, and it's giving me pause to think now, and it's interesting. It's the best way for me to put it. It's helping me to have a different viewpoint, and it's funny because it may. And these are thoughts that are going to that are going to continue on long after this stream ends. Mm-hmm. To almost be able to give me a way of simplifying my stance. It's good. I appreciate it.
Okay. Yeah, and that's why like I like that better because it's not contingent upon society. Like I don't care what society thinks or what they do or whatever normal tendencies it has at the time, and it transcends time. So there was never a time when slavery was okay, even if they thought it was, because it violates well-being. And what was I going to say? There are people there's some objections to this, mainly because the ability to determine what makes something a justified immorality versus a unjustified immorality. And
I think where you get the pushback, again, to put the Christian hat back on for a second, where you get the pushback from. So, and this is something that I've talked a lot with Dr. Josh Bowen about, who wrote the slavery book. I've got half a dozen of his books sitting 3 feet from me. And I'm actually getting together with him and his lovely wife this week, Friday, just outside Washington, D.C. for a meal. Going on a little trip. Anyway, when he talked about that, some of the pushback that he's talked about previously is the thought that, well, we went into these lands and conquered them. I hope I'm representing his stance correctly. I'll tell him later, and he'll probably tell me I fucked up. But we went into these lands and conquered these lands, and killed all the men, took the women and children, virgin women, and then we had to take care of them, right? So we either kept them or we put some of them to work, took them as slaves. But look, it's so much better than what they would have been faced with, and I think that's part of the justification that they try to use, so that when you say, whether it was justified or unjustified, they would look at that as a form of justification, which is why I think partially I fall back to the whole, yes, but it's and this is why it's interesting. I really like that you're making me think about the whole harm thing or well-being thing, because it helps to, I think, again, help simplify. It's like I'm having like a real-time metamorphosis here. That's the wrong word to use. But because what I would want to say is it's the imposition of will put into there. But I could step into your shoes and say, yes, it's an imposition of will, but it violates well-being. So it's almost like there's an unnecessary piece.
Yeah, I would say the I'll say involuntary imposition of will.
Sure, yeah.
Right? Because that's to be a little more specified, because it could be a voluntary imposition of will.
Yeah, like indentured service versus slavery.
Yeah. Or I would say like a form of lifting weights is a form of voluntary imposition of will. Like you're trying to get up, but you intentionally put weight to hold you down. Right? That wouldn't necessarily be immoral. So like to intentionally make your situation harder to make yourself tougher, right? So So something like that wouldn't necessarily be immoral, even though it is an imposition of will. It's a voluntary, right? So I would the involuntary imposition of will, I would put that in one of my prongs, freedom. So yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I'd be violating your freedom by doing that, and they can also be related, right? These things tend to affect each other. So I said earlier, I said health, wealth, happiness, security, freedom, right? So let's say you're sick, you need some medicine, and I steal money from you. Well, now you're going to be sicker. I violated your health, right? I stole money from you, I stole your wealth. It could make you sicker, violate your health. You're going to be less happy as a result. There's your happiness.
And it's a big ass Venn diagram.
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot going on. I'm sorry, my daughter is.
Anyway, Dean's going to take over now because otherwise I won't.
No.
I'm sorry.
I was thinking. I don't know if I'm still connected here because my
you're still connected.
Your
I think
video's
your
frozen, but we
camera's
can
just
hear you
frozen.
talking.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
If you want to turn your video
my
off and
laptop
turn it
is
back
fully.
on,
I'm
it
trying
might
to
help.
close down as many things as I can. I was just wondering if it's when you say you go back and take the big picture, and you look at it as a species. I was wondering if it is dependent on the species alone. Like, I'm just trying to think of with livestock and stuff. If we're killing animals to eat them and growing them to eat them, is it still moral? I don't know if this is throwing a big monkey wrench into the whole discussion, but is it moral to kill animals and eat them?
This is something we did talk about this. Wes and I did. We did branch into that a little bit.
I say that's immoral.
Yeah, it's something that I struggle with, right? That's why I don't eat as much. Like we talked about how fucking delicious bacon is, right? Mm-hmm. But that's the biggest kind of moral dilemma that I have. And I remember saying, I'll say it again: chickens. No, I'll eat a chicken every day. Stupid little animals pecking around, stuff like that. No, cut their head off and serve it to me on a plate all day long. But some other animals, and I think it, like, there are lots of species that that are as intelligent as we are. I've recently watched a 3-part documentary series called Secrets of the Octopus with my wife. She is kind of an octopus fanatic, you know that, Dean. And learning, like, there's actually thought now from some of the scientists that octopuses are smarter than dolphins. Like, it's crazy how intelligent these creatures are. And so when we look at other primate species, when we look at things like, when we look at animals like elephants who will go back and visit the graves and all these other things, we don't understand. I don't think we don't understand their moral system, but I think it's probably fair to say that they have one in place based on some of their behaviors. So is it immoral to kill and farm and raise and all these animals? Yes.
I would say definitely. So it violates well-being. So for me, for my system, well-being begins with.
It violates well-being for the animals, but does it violate well-being for us? Because we are omnivores. Right? We need meat to help us be fully healthy.
Make no distinction. So it is immoral. Period. I would say, if you need it to live, it may be the case where it is a justified immorality. But if well-being is the standard and you're killing something, then it can't be moral. Because obviously it's not good for that thing's well-being to die.
And perhaps you should continue to expand upon that by saying sentient creatures, because you probably don't oppose killing plants, right?
Right. Yeah. Right. So I was there. So sentient. So it's about your ability to suffer, right? So, like, if I were to take a rock and pick my hammer up and bash it to bits, I've done nothing immoral. If I do it to a puppy, right now it's a very different scenario. And
in your Christine.
So if we switched, if we switched from farming livestock to farming, like, say, crickets, to get our protein from an insect,
I would call it immoral.
That's
the cricket is still sentient. So now
is it?
Yes,
are insects sentient?
Yes, they definitely are.
So, yeah,
they're sentient.
They take actions and make decisions. Yeah.
You ever try to kill a roach and it runs away? right? That means it has self-awareness, right? It can distinguish itself from the environment. It is engaging in a form of self-defense via evasion, or like if sometimes it might try to fight you, right? So that is definitely a sentient creature. So whatever it is, if AI became sentient, you would now have some moral obligations to it, at bare minimum, to not do any harm to it. So I'll apply it to anything that's sentient, because if it can experience, then that's when the morality starts to kick in. That's when you can affect its happiness, its health, etc.
So
we need to define sentience, because in certain instances, plants can be determined as sentient.
I wouldn't. So for me, sentience is when something is self-aware. So when it can distinguish itself from its environment. I don't know of a plant that's able to do that.
A Venus flytrap?
I don't think so. Plant? To me, from Venus flytraps, they seem to be completely reactionary. I was at the botanical gardens here, I live in the DC area, and I was at the botanical gardens about a week ago. I took my daughter there, and there was Venus flytraps there, and like it seemed when I was looking at this plant, there was no indication to me that it was self-aware. But if it is, we now have moral obligations to it.
So I kind of want to delve into
just an inability to know whether something like that would be sentient.
We may not know it, but and that's the thing too. You can my objective morality, like is not based on any sort of epistemology, right? It's based on ontology. So if the thing is self-aware, you have moral obligations to it. You may not know that it's self-aware, but you would still have more obligations to it. If you were to harm it, you would still be doing something wrong. You just may not know it because you are violating its well-being.
So just to kind of delve into the because I think the insects one is a really interesting one, like specifically crickets, because I've if you ever check out some major podcasts, not these tiny ones like mine. But there's a really, really big podcast called Stuff You Should Know, and they did an episode called Crickets, the Future of Food. And when talking about the potential of farming and or, essentially herding crickets for livestock and potential food, they talked about the crickets are essentially incapable of feeling any sort of pain. So, and this is true for most insects, and that's something where we have a mild debate on what sentience is, because even though the crickets eat and drink and they are separate from their environment, and they may make some sort of decision, it's probably very, 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 very primal at best, and they're incapable of understanding things like pain or suffering, which is kind of how you started your argument for well-being. You said that, something that's capable of suffering. Well, most insects aren't capable of that. In fact, we don't know.
I thought you said he could. I thought you said he couldn't feel pain.
Yeah, they're not capable of suffering.
Okay. Well, that's different. So being able to not being able to feel pain and not being capable of suffering is very different. So like when I grew up with roaches in the house, and I try to kill one, it gets away. So we know at minimum the roach does not desire to be killed.
No, that you do not know that. What you know is that the roach is reacting to you moving towards it.
I wouldn't say that, because
that is a very basic. You can't know what the roach is thinking. That's for sure.
Well, sure. I mean, it is acting as if it doesn't want to be killed.
I can't imagine. So, for instance, it's kind of at least my 2 cents on the matter is that it would kind of be like if there was some giant creature on Earth and it accidentally stepped on me. I don't know that I would be aware that it was coming or that it was trying to kill me. And just like with you smashing a roach or killing an ant, the roach is probably unaware of your intentions towards it. It's just reacting in a way of, if I saw a giant thing heading towards me, I might move too. Its intention may not be to kill me, but given that I'm a sentient creature and capable,
have you ever tried to kill a roach?
I have killed a roach. Not only have I tried, I have successfully done so.
All right. So first, I looked this up. It says like, yes, cockroaches are capable of feeling pain. While their nervous system and brain are different from humans, they possess nociceptors. Maybe I pronounced that wrong. Specialized neurons that detect and respond to painful stimuli.
Yeah, and I did a quick little Google search, and on Scientific American, it said that insects, because I just like oddly enough, I typed in "can insects" and the first hit is "feel pain."
Yeah. Creepy Google.
And it said they appear. I don't know how they do this research, whether they put mood lighting on and get crickets get nasty or something, but I don't know how they do this. But they say that they appear to experience both pleasure and pain. So they're saying that they are sentient, and that recent discoveries have raised more questions about the possibility of complex cognition within insects.
So I'm just reading from an article.
I was not aware.
I'm reading from an article, and it's a bit older. It's from 2010. It's called Nociceptors, the sensors of the pain pathway. And it indicates that most insects don't contain nociceptors, including crickets. They have... and the I'll read you the kind of the short here is they say essentially crickets don't behave in such a way to protect injured parts. They don't limp after suffering leg injury. They don't decline to feed or mate because of abdominal injuries. On the contrary, insects continue with normal activities after severe injury or removal of body parts.
So, how old is that study? I don't want to spend this episode arguing about whether crickets can feel pain.
Well,
I looked it up.
The whole topic is morality. So that the most recent thing I quoted was 2016. However, the initial study that I talked about nociceptors and crickets was from 2010.
Gotcha. I looked it up. Now mine is saying crickets have the nociceptors, just like cockroaches, and they can feel pain. But regardless, so what I'm concerned about is suffering, not necessarily just the feeling of pain. All right. So like if like you have both of you have children. If I were to torture your child in front of you, you wouldn't feel that pain, but you would still be suffering. So that's what I'm concerned about. Not necessarily just feeling pain. That's just one prong of it.
Yeah, I think I agree. Yeah, suffering comes in different shapes and sizes.
Yeah. And so I forgot exactly where I was going with this, but Matt, Fasaki, you remind me.
I mean, so essentially, the long and the short of the whole conversation is because I think in specifically Michael's case of morality, we come up with these head-butting ideas that almost are semi-redundant or have to play upon one another, whereas when you use a objective standard like well-being, something that can be measured on a universal level, like outside of even human thought or process. So for instance, I take a brick, I throw it at you, the brick hits you, that causes you pain. A brick hits you, it causes you pain. That's just the way things are. It is the state of affairs. Whereas if you kind of take this incorporation of reduction of harm or to promote flourishing as this kind of triune or this milk stool of basis for morality, what you're doing is you're kind of having to pick and choose what to use to defend it. Whereas with well-being, literally reality itself is determining what is good and what is bad. We're looking at reality to determine, is this good for well-being or not? And it's pretty easy to determine, although not necessarily the best thing to test on other sentient creatures or humans. But I give you a glass of water, you're now more hydrated. I give you a glass of battery acid, and your stomach melts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's a very interesting, and I mean this in the most positive way possible. Mm-hmm. Simplification. Yeah, I don't mean it as a pejorative. I mean it as a positive thing. And it's interesting because I had used it previously in the past, those like you said, the kind of, I like the way you said use triune. It's neat. It's neat to give religious people a poke in the eye. It's good. And I would use them, I guess, in conjunction with one another to try to have, I guess I was hoping for easier explanatory power. I'm not sure it has more explanatory power.
Well, I think so. I think I would say it has more explanatory power.
Oh, no, I'm talking about mine.
Gotcha.
I'm talking about mine. I
Okay.
don't think mine has more explanatory power than yours. I think they're equal. I think what you've done, and again, meaning in a positive way, is shortcut. It's just kind of shortcut it.
Mm-hmm.
Which is really interesting in it. But I'm curious now. So let me take the least charitable position possible.
I have a really fun experiment once you do that.
So something really uncharitable.
Okay.
Well, how do you know? I'm pulling. Yeah. No, it's interesting. I'm having a hard time from your perspective, using that simpler framework. I'm having a hard time formulating a defeater to it in my head because my brain is already going to what you had laid out. And I'm trying to shut that part of my brain off and think like a Christian for a second, because they're going to say their whole thing is rooted in God, and kind of the best I come up with is, how do you know that? Right? Like how Christians will say, well, you know, or how do you know it won't change or something like that?
Oh, yeah. So when I say it wouldn't, this isn't even like something that I would say that like I found out. It is, so when I say morality is well-being, it is merely an analytic proposition. I'm just defining a term. So when I use the word morality, this is what I'm referring to. So, because I don't know if you saw the episode when we had Pastor Ainsley, he was like, how do you know that morality is equal to well-being? And I kept asking him, I was like, well, how do you know that a foot is 12 inches? We're just defining a term. So when I use this word, I mean well-being. If you're saying morality is whatever God wants, you're using the same word, but in a different way. We're equivocating. You're talking about something different. You're talking about what God desires, and I don't care about that. I'm talking about what is good for sentient creatures.
Yeah, because that actually does have the capacity to be objective.
Yes.
Also, just to point this out, is not only is it objective, but it's also self-correcting in an interesting kind of way. So, for instance, let's say there is the worst-case scenario of mutually assured destruction and a nuclear holocaust, essentially, for the world. And there's a few living survivors that come out of some cement bunker somewhere, and now they start to experience aftermath of nuclear waste and start to develop mutations. Well, what may be good for them in the current world may not be good for them in a post-nuclear world, right? So drinking water now may not be the same as drinking something like lead-based water in the future versus doing it now.
Yeah.
So it's self-correcting because in the future, we're still only concerned about well-being. So what is good for you in the future, even if we determine something that has been, good for us for years, in the future, if we recognize that it's actually bad for well-being, it still corresponds to reality that it's bad for well-being. It hasn't.
And you learned. Right?
Yeah, now we've just learned it.
Yeah, that's neat. Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it.
Also, so reformers, I tend to talk to reformers a lot, and they ask, what gives me the authority to impose my system upon God? And
that begs the question.
But you know what, though? I'm actually not doing that. Like, so I am not. So in my system, I'm not saying what you ought to do. I'm not saying what reality should be. I'm just saying what it is.
Yeah, you're just saying, you're just, and again, going back to what you said before, ontologically, it is just a fact of the matter.
Yes. So God floods the entire earth. I didn't say that he shouldn't do it. I'm just saying if he does it, he's immoral. There is no ought. I'm not even going there. I'm just saying you did this, you're immoral. Whether you ought to do it, well, that's going to be contingent upon your values.
Well, you said that you're imposing your morality on God.
No, I'm not.
No, I'm just saying that's
all I'm doing is
the
labeling.
argument, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the argument I get from God. Like, who am I to say what God should and shouldn't do? And what I'm saying is, I'm not doing that at all.
But I'm just saying in their argument, who am I to impose my morality on God? But then
Right.
they're taking it the other way. God is imposing his morality on us.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and they would just come back with Potter and the clay or something like that.
Yes,
right?
yes, that's exactly what they were to go. They will
so
take the
he could
Romans
destroy
9.
us.
Yeah.
So if I could, I'd like a fun experiment. If you can stay the mindset of your original statement of morality by reduction of harm, promotion of flourishing, and not impeding will. And AAA, if you could stay in the mindset of what is best for well-being. I'd like both of your responses to something that often Christians bring up for no reason, but this time it's kind of relevant. Abortion. How does your moral system handle abortion?
Well, it's interesting. So for full transparency and honesty, like I said, I'm undergoing like a real-time change. And this is something, hey, for any Christian, for any believer of any stripe that may watch this, here's an example of how people can change the way they think, because I'm doing it right now.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'll do is I'll extract everything AAA has said, and at least partially convinced me of. I'm going to pull that out for a second, and I'm going to go back to what it was that I said before. So I would still say that abortion. So I don't think that there is any intelligent argument against the fact that abortion is the termination of a potential human life. I don't think you can reasonably argue that. Whether we're talking about a blastocyst or a 12-week-old, whatever. I don't care which. It's the ending of a potential human life. However, I am still pro-choice, and the reason I am pro-choice is because I think the balance has to fall to the mother, because the mother is the one who is autonomous. And I remember having a discussion like this once before, and sorry to be so long-winded with it, but and I'll preface it right now. I am not calling babies or like fetuses parasites.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you look at what a parasite does to the human body, and you look at what a fetus does to the human body, they do the same damn thing.
Yeah, they rob you of nutrients.
If you have a mother that does not take proper prenatal vitamins, that does not look after her health and nutrition, all these other things, the fetus will just take, regardless of what the mother has to give. It is not yet autonomous. And I think you have to give permission, like give up your bodily autonomy in order to allow this other human to grow inside you, to term and stuff like that.
Is abortion moral?
Is abortion moral? I'm having a hard time separating it from what I've learned and what I'm starting to assimilate to now. As I would say,
but there's also
abortion is immoral, but given bodily autonomy, justifiable.
But there's also the question of whether the abortion is just because the mother thinks that she's not ready, or whether because it actually impedes her ability to, or her health, it impacts her health in a negative way.
Oh yeah,
well, this is going to sound crazy, but I don't think it matters at all.
A tubal pregnancy, guaranteed for both, right?
So
as crazy as it sounds, I don't think that matters at all.
That's what I was going to ask about. So, Dean, you would say that the abortion, like you say, would have some limitations. Like if the pregnant person isn't getting an abortion for the right reasons, it's morally.
I think that abortion is moral. I don't think abortion is immoral in any case.
Okay.
I think it is moral because the decision is falling upon the human that has already has a life established and is living in our world.
Let's say worst case scenario, woman's pregnant and she's like, you know what? I don't feel like being pregnant. I got a cute date this weekend. I'm not gonna be able to fit in my dress. I'm gonna get an abortion now. Moral, immoral.
I would really like to see how many times that actually happens.
Yeah, I'm just trying to give the worst case scenario. Let's just say
okay. Worst case in that worst case scenario again. I think that person needs to get their head checked. But again, it's not an immoral action based on the fact that it's the woman who has a life, who is established, who is living, who is involved in society, is making a decision based on her own thoughts and feelings at the time, based on her own health, based on her own, based on the fact that she wants her life to proceed in a certain way.
So
it's not an immoral action for her to decide that this is how I want my life to proceed.
I'd like to kind of challenge you on a couple of things here.
In such a way where she doesn't have to carry a life, then that's her choice.
Yeah, I'd like to challenge you on a couple of things here. So if we talk about morality, even if you use Michael's version of it, reduction of harm, I would still say it's an immoral action.
Hey, Fasad, can you repeat that? You went out for a second. I don't know if they heard you.
Yeah, sorry. I said no matter whether we're using Michael's or AAA's definition of morality, I would say that abortion would constitute an immoral action. Because in Michael's framework, we're using a reduction of harm, and in AAA's framework, we're using promotion of well-being. And in both cases, we're eradicating a potential life. So I would say it's an immoral act no matter what.
But there's two lives involved, right?
I don't disagree.
So,
but that doesn't change anything.
Like promotion of well-being, or promotion of flourishing and reduction in harm. You've got to determine whose life is more important.
Nope, because both lives are equally important. Because all lives are equally important.
Well, one's a potential life, one's an actual life.
It's already a living
thing. It's alive.
But it's a potential life. There could be things that happen that cause the body to abort the fetus anyway.
Well, sure. Like, but let's say, like, besides like a miscarriage, that baby's alive. It is composed of living cells. This is a zygote. It's alive. It's
living, and the cells are dividing, and it's continuing to grow. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, so in very rare exceptions, you can have like up to second trimester abortions, which means that it can be like 27 weeks old, which is where most people think the brain is already fully developed in utero, at least, and we have consciousness of a fetus, and you would still argue that that's not an immoral act.
Yeah, there's gray areas, I guess.
So this is where I said I wanted to challenge you, because if you just take it from the stance of...
This is the whole Roe v. Wade, right? Like, because Roe put up to viability, which is 26 weeks, I believe.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean,
but to be clear, we're not really. I don't think Fasad is concerned about the legality of it.
No, I don't care about that. I'm talking about strictly from a moral standpoint, and I want to challenge you on this. And the reason I wanted to challenge you on two prongs of this argument, and the first is the moral aspect of it being something that is right or wrong, and what you're doing knowingly is essentially eradicating a potential life. I would say that's an immoral act. Not only that, but you're now saying that these two lives, one not fully developed, one fully developed, however, are not equal. But let me give you a really easy scenario of where I think, do you believe that all adult humans have equal value of life?
Yes.
Okay, and if someone breaks into your home and is threatening to kill you and your family, and you pull a gun out and shoot them in the head, would you say that that person's life was any less valuable as a human adult than yours is?
No.
Right. But what you've done is you've committed an immoral act because you've ended a life. You just said it was equal value to everyone else's, and I agree. I agree that all human life and all sentient life should be on the same page. And by ending that early, or by intentionally taking it, or by destroying well-being, or by increasing harm, whichever aspect we want to use here, you've committed an immoral act. We can take that and still apply it to things like fetuses, and we can do it and apply it to things like animals. Shooting a random animal in the face for no reason is an immoral act. Aborting a child is an immoral act. However, that doesn't mean I'm not pro-choice. I'm pro-choice because of bodily autonomy. And that's the only thing I need to stand on, because it's a woman's right to her own body that no one else has, including a fetus. I don't have a right to it. A husband doesn't have a right to it. A rapist doesn't have a right to it. And a baby doesn't have a right to it.
That's what I was going to say. So like Michael, I think he hit the hit on the button, right? He said it's immoral because if we're using well-being as a standard or reduction
of justified morality.
Yeah,
like,
it's
a justified immorality.
It's a justified immorality. So think about this. Let's say you're walking out of the convenience store late at night, and somebody tries to come and kidnap you, right? And you punch them in the face so you can get away. You're immoral. You just punch somebody in the face. It's not good for the kidnapper to get punched in the face, but it's justified because he was trying to kidnap you. So you had a right to do it.
Yeah, which would infringe on your well-being and your bodily autonomy and all those other things. Yeah, and it's funny because it happens every once in a while, but yeah, like my mind has been changed on this, and so I don't think I can. And it's funny because this is what I started to say when you would ask me to take it from my stance, but I am now involuntarily forced to look at it a different way because my mind has been changed, and I don't think we can choose to believe. I don't think we can choose to believe things. I think belief is a process of becoming convinced, and I am now convinced otherwise.
Yeah, that's kind of the whole purpose of the show, because we thought when we heard you arguing with Wes, both he and I had a discussion off camera and off show, and we talk all the time in person anyway, but we just kind of felt like, I feel like you're very close to hitting all the right marks. But I bet you that if we kind of talk to you and have this conversation just like this and kind of expand upon it and like put you in certain weird fringe situations or point out the whole well-being thing and how a system can be self-correcting and objective, that as a reasonable adult, you probably will come around to seeing things very similar to the way we see them. And I think that's what's happening.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm going to have to do a lot more thinking about it still. Not because it's still, but I'm going to have to figure out how I'm going to parse out the different things in my thought pattern.
Yeah. Well, I think AAA was
have already got me thinking a lot more about my whole sentence that I said earlier about it not being abortion not being immoral at all.
Yeah, I
was going to say that. So even with the abortion, so it's like let's grant the fetus all the same rights as the mother, and I do. And so the fetus doesn't have a right to the mother's body. The mother does not have a right to the fetus body. Nobody has a right to anyone's body. It just so happens that nature is fixed in a way where the fetus is dependent upon the mother, but the mother's not dependent upon the fetus. So
here's an interesting question. So with the thought experiment, now to turn it around, I'm just going to take control of your show here, Fasad. But so let's say that we had a fetus in utero, 26 weeks. I think Dean said the viability. I can't remember. I only play a doctor on TV sometimes. I'm not a doctor. So the 26-week-old fetus, is it still justifiable given that the real possibility now exists to deliver that child, to have a live birth, and then continue to gestate it and things like put it in an oven or whatever, like to finish cooking.
So because when I say
it's still justifiable.
So I believe the pregnant person can remove the fetus whenever she wants, but the right to remove the fetus is not a right to kill. It's just a right to remove the fetus.
Right.
Yeah. So
Okay, but
the
then
argument.
because
Sorry, I was going to say the argument that I think is coming up is one that we've heard multiple times, and people just don't quite think of it the same way because they think of abortion and they think very much like my sister, who is a devout Christian, and they think instantly murdering children. The process of abortion is quite literally the termination of the pregnancy, but the current medical practice, which allows for that, winds up killing the child. And in doing so in the safest medical way possible currently, it will always kill the child because it means basically taking something that's inside a woman, making it as small as possible so you can get it out in a very small incision and or a very small pathway so you don't cause major damage when removing it. And so what you're arguing against is the process. Now, I just like AAA, I agree. I don't care what age the fetus is. The mother has a right to her own body, and she has a right to remove it. Unfortunately, the process kills a child, and both of us, we've came up with this hypothetical scenario of in the future, if there's this amazing medical technology that would allow us to remove a fetus in a safe and as safe or safer way to the mother that does not kill the child in the process, we would undoubtedly say we're pro for that, and we would undoubtedly say that is a much more moral system all around, and we'd be all for it and support of it. Unfortunately,
but then
it just doesn't work that way.
That's the problem.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. And who knows when that may or who knows? You know, modern technology. It's like Moore's law, right, with computers, like, stuff like that. Who knows when something like that might be possible? I almost feel like we should bring a woman into this discussion.
Poor guy sitting around talking about abortion.
So, but it's it's interesting. Sorry, Dean. I should shut up. Let you talk more.
No. I was just saying, like, if you could remove the fetus or the child and keep it alive, then you gotta discuss who's going to take care of that child, and is that actually increasing well-being if the child being handed over to the state.
Right.
Well, it may or may not. If it's
being alive does not necessarily mean that it's the best thing for it.
Yeah, if it's not contributing to well-being, it would be just a justified immorality, because the fetus doesn't have a right to the mother's body, just like no one else has a right to anyone else's body.
Yeah, no, I was thinking if there was a way to remove the child's, if it's past the age of viability and you can remove the child alive, then
I would say if you could do that, then it wouldn't even be immoral. You've ended the pregnancy and you've saved the fetus. I'd say this is a good thing.
Yes, it is a good thing, but what I'm saying is that now you have the problem of how that child is going to be taken care of, and handing it over to the state and having it, bounce around in foster homes or whatever, that's not necessarily increasing the well-being for that child. So being alive may not be the best course of action.
Well, maybe. There's no, I don't know how my life is going to turn out after this podcast. It could be the case that yes. What I'm saying is so just I'll say, just because somebody right when they're brought into this world, they may not have the best odds. I would say if the woman's already resorting to pregnancy, she obviously doesn't want the kid, right? Bar some medical emergency. So it would that kid is better off in the hands of the state than with a parent who doesn't want it.
Gene and I would probably argue the kid's better off in Canada than the U.S., but
I don't disagree.
Just because of the inherent better social welfare programs that exist. Not that it's perfect, but before anyone in the U.S. tries to crucify me, it's not our system's not perfect, but it's better. And so, I think it becomes. I think if something like that, so we follow that continue to follow that bouncing ball. So now the technology exists to do what it is we're talking about. It now becomes, I think, so the mother didn't want that child, was going to abort that child, the child was going to be dead. I think I would take the stance that it's better that it's not, but it now becomes incumbent upon society to care for that child to the best of its ability, to promote its well-being to the best of its ability.
Yeah, I mean, I think if the technology were to come along, I think not only were the technology be developed, but I think that there would also probably be laws and regulations on how it's used. Because, for instance, there are already things in place now in both Canada and the United States in which if you would like to give up essentially your, I'm not going to use the word ownership, but your parenthood
Parental rights,
of a child, your parental rights, you can do so in both Canada and the United States. And, I mean, like if AAA right now, he has a 3, almost 4-year-old, wanted to give up parental rights, he could do so, and there are legal ways in which he could go about doing so. Now, I think that would probably be a very likely scenario if this technology were to develop in the future, in which you'd have to say, not only are we giving up legal rights, but there's a process, and there probably is wait list and forms and infinite number of red tape, but that's still, I would still be for all of those things in consideration of morality's sake. Now, I'm fairly anti-government as far as I want limited government in general, but when it comes to just morality's sake, I would say that by all means, if that's what's necessary to make this work, then that's a better system than what we currently have.
And you're good, and you're cool with your taxes increasing to support those social welfare programs?
That's a different argument. That's nothing to do with my morals.
I'm a voluntarist. We can talk about this another time, but I'm a voluntarist, and so as a result, I'm an anarchist as well. So these are, especially when you're talking about such a hot button topic like abortion. I think the social welfare programs just have to follow in line. To do those things. It's like the idea now that, what is it? I think Florida passed its 6-week ban, right? Like just dumb fuckery. And the irony is you're going to force this onto women. And then you're going to say, well, don't look at me to help take care of the kid, right? You should have kept your legs closed. I would say is immoral. Birth. Yeah, they're not precisely. Yeah, pro-birth, not pro-life. Yeah, because life goes past, the slap on the ass and the taking of the first breath.
Yeah,
I'd agree.
But once it's out, they say it's your problem now.
Yeah, exactly, and that's where, and again, this is where Canada is not perfect for sure, but there exists a broader social welfare network to aid in the raising of those children, right? Like we have CAS here, Children's Aid Society, whereas you have CPS, right, Child Protective Services. They do the same thing.
Here's a question for you. I haven't put a lot of thought into this. What do you think about like Good Samaritan ethics? Like, for instance, do I have any positive obligations to you? Like, so I normally would say I don't have any obligation other than to do you no harm, unless we have some sort of like prearranged agreement. Like, for instance, like I'm a lifeguard, you're in a pool. So if you're drowning, I have a moral obligation to rescue you. But other than that, like if I see you drowning or something like that, and I'm just a guy, I don't have to do anything.
So it's different. So we can throw a couple different scenarios. Like everybody's familiar with the person tied to the railway tracks and the switch, right? We all know about that one.
Yeah.
Let's do that one.
I mean, I think you if you look at again, I have to take it now from a different stance. From a well-being perspective, if the train is on the tracks and it will kill 5 people, right? And if I throw the switch, my action will now cause the train to be diverted and kill 1 person, right? I believe I am morally obligated because the most well-being will be done by me throwing that switch. And I've talked about this before. Like what I would do is I would throw the switch and then go home and cry myself to sleep, right? Because it'd be like, I killed that person, right? So if you take your analogy of swimming, if you're walking by and the person's drowning If you can swim, I think you have a moral obligation.
Okay.
If you can't swim, then I don't think you have the same moral obligation. Maybe you look for a branch or or one of the little life preserver things or something like that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I haven't put
for the record, real quick.
Go ahead.
Just for the record, real quick, since I'm pending a security clearance that's been almost 12 months in the making, I love America and I support it in all ways.
Right. The evil. You're a fan of the evil overlords.
Yeah. I for one welcome our new overlords.
Yes. America is number one in everything.
I guess I should say, as someone who's going to be crossing your border Thursday night, I also love America.
Yeah, I love it with all of my heart. If you're listening to this person investigating me for a security clearance.
But AAA,
I mean, that's an interesting. It's an interesting thought experiment with the swimming analogy. Somebody's drowning. Do you have a moral obligation to save them if you're just a person and you notice it?
I mean, there's really interesting experiments in general when it comes to things like this. We're all aware of like the hotel fire incident kind of thing. Like there's a fire in a hotel and you think to yourself, I shouldn't call 911 because obviously 911's been flooded with calls regarding the hotel fire. And it turns out it burns on, about 60% longer than if somebody had just called because everyone thinks it's somebody else's responsibility. Well, I mean, it's called
the bystander effect.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, there's obviously tons of witnesses and people that are being impacted and they think somebody else has already done something to help, solve this crisis. However, I don't, it's a fun thought experiment because I don't think that people should have moral obligations to others, in which I don't think I should be essentially forced or punished for not doing something on your behalf, even if it's a more moral action.
I don't think you're going to be punished for it. So let's say we talk about the person in the swimming pool, right? I don't think you'll be punished for not saving the person. I think you're just gonna have to live with yourself.
AAA, you're muted. Yeah, you're muted.
You're muted.
My bad. Is he immoral for not doing it?
I think so. Yes. Now, again, if you can swim, I think you're immoral for not doing it because you had the capacity to help and you didn't help. If you can't swim, it'd be like, well, fuck. If I jump in the water, then there's two people drowning. Right? I haven't added anything to the situation. I certainly haven't helped his well-being, and I've reduced my well-being along with my wife's, my daughters, everybody I know. Now my work has to find somebody to hire me to replace me because I'm dead. All these other things, right? So I think it kind of is on a continuum, a sliding scale.
So
you're not promoting flourishing by not helping somebody either.
You're right.
I would call it a moral virtue. I wouldn't call it an obligation, as in like this is something that I could not do and still not be immoral. It's like it's not like I took any sort of act. I just decided to not do anything. Now there are some moral virtues that are so, if they weren't completed, they would be viewed by society as so insidious that person is an immoral person. Like, for instance, let's say like I walk outside and there's a child, not mine, who I have no obligations to, and she is being like brutally gang raped or something like that, and I decide not to do anything about it, right? I think people would be, for good reason, would look at me as an immoral person. This is an awful person. And I think the fact that someone would do that, it's indicative of their character. But I wouldn't call the fact that they decided to do nothing. I'd have to put that in the moral virtue.
Yeah, you were able to convince me on the whole well-being thing You're
Mhm.
not gonna be able to convince me of that one. I think that
You think that's an obligation? So
Yeah,
you think there are some sort of there are good good Samaritan ethics. There are things that you
yeah,
have
like
to.
I think you should do or promote as much well-being as you have the reasonable capacity to do, whether that be through charitable work or volunteer work or helping out, holding a door open and for an old lady when she's trying to go in and do something or something like that. I think there are, and I mean, and we might just be using like you said virtue and I'm saying obligation.
Mhm.
I think they're virtually synonymous in this case.
Gotcha. So, because for me, when I say obligation, if you don't do this, it would be an unjustified immorality if you wouldn't do this. That's why I would call it a moral obligation.
Yeah, and that's why I said when Dean kind of was talking about it before,
Mhm.
I think the biggest, like, you may not be punished from society,
Mhm.
but I would hazard a guess. So you're walking by, the person's drowning, you are a certified lifeguard,
Mhm.
right? But you're not working, right? You're walking home. You're walking home from your friend's house, right? After watching the football game.
Mhm.
You might not be punished by society, but you'd have to live with that. I could
True.
have done
I agree with you on that, and I'm glad you said this is something that I wouldn't be able to convince you on, because now we have something, because this is now that's debatable, now not now that's agreeable, right?
Yeah.
So there's something we can fight over. So let's say, like, when we talk about a woman and she's with child and she wants to have an abortion. No, she desires to have an abortion, but she decides not to and carry it to term.
Okay.
She is under no moral obligation to do so. She is committing a moral virtue.
Okay.
So she could not do this, and then it would just be a justified immorality.
Right. So what I would say is, and I think this is why I said a moment ago, that I think those terms in certain cases are going to be synonymous, because what you're calling a moral virtue, I'm saying she's doing what she has the capacity to do. Like, remember I said before, right? You have the ability to, to be as charitable as possible or do volunteer work or things like that. So she's doing what she has the capacity to do. Is she morally obligated? Like, again, like, this is, and I think it's an interesting way to look at it. I can't put myself in the place of a woman. I can more easily put myself in the place of a person, trying to save a drowning victim. Right. But I think she's doing what she has the capacity to do. So maybe it's not exactly synonymous. So maybe you could use the moral view, going above and beyond her moral requirement.
So do you think that we have a moral duty or moral obligation to promote as much well-being as possible? It seems like you would fall into this.
Yes, I think I do. Yeah. And whether that be, again, through like charitable donations that my wife and I do every year, or volunteering, like with stuff that my wife does.
Are you immoral for not giving to charity?
Am I immoral? Yes, because I have the capacity to do some good. It doesn't impede my ability to help my own level of flourishing or well-being, to give a little bit. It's kind of like, now I'm not talking about, like, I don't donate millions of dollars, right?
Yeah, right.
I don't have millions of dollars to donate, right? I give a little bit because I can give a little bit.
So do you think you think that we are under an obligation to find out how much we need to live charitably, to live comfortably, and then give the rest to charity?
No, I'm not talking about like that, where you have to, it's like, I think that I personally think, and I think this is where it comes into subjectivity, because this is a feeling that I personally have. But I wouldn't look at you and say, what do you mean you don't donate to the, Heart and Stroke Foundation? How immoral are you? right? Oh, I help to clean up my neighborhood. I organize a trash pickup day in my neighborhood, and me and a bunch of neighbors get together and clean the area up. And I volunteer at a soup kitchen. But you don't donate to Heart and Stroke? Would an extra $5 kill you? And that's where I think that the high degree of subjectivity comes in.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So I guess so. What would you call a moral virtue?
I think and again, I think we're.
Is it possible to do something moral that's not required?
Well, yeah, that's altruism.
Right. Okay. So, but wouldn't that fit in the category of what you were calling a moral obligation?
No, because again, I feel a degree of obligation to do these types of things.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's like when you look at birds, sometimes you'll see birds that will feed other birds, and it's this. Now they do it to kind of show, look how good I am. Like, I'm so strong, I can even afford to feed you, right? I don't do it as a status thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I give to a few charities. My wife gives to a few charities. We do some volunteer stuff, especially for the work that she does. I help her volunteer in some of these types of things. I don't do it for a status symbol. I do it to be truly altruistic. Like, here's this thing that I'm going to do, and I don't have any expectation of anything in return. I can do a little bit, and I feel a degree of moral obligation. I personally, subjectively feel a degree of moral obligation to do what is it I have the capacity to do. But it's not my job to say, you then must also do these types of things, right? Because you're going to feel subjectively that you either do or don't do. So when you are brushing your teeth at night before you go to bed and you're looking at yourself in the mirror, you can look at yourself and you know whether or not you were as good a human as you could have been that day or not. And that's for you to live with, not me.
Gotcha.
Right? You're the only one who knows whether you did everything you could that day to be a decent human.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. We're gonna have to have you back on again. I like to fight you a little bit more on these moral virtues and moral obligations.
Yeah, and I think when you're talking about virtue versus obligation, I think that's where it starts to grind down into a higher degree of subjectivity, right? Should you give, like some people say, well, I like to give away 10%. I like to donate 10% of my gross to charities, right? Well, yeah, I could do that, but some other people, 10% of my gross, like, I'm going to be in fucking poverty if I donate 10% of my gross to charity. To live up to his subjective standard, to say to be, what he thinks is a moral, a moral person for giving, it's like, what, you don't give away 10%? Well, what kind of fucking animal are you? Right? I think that's where it grinds down into a high degree of subjectivity. Some people can't donate to charity. Some people will volunteer their time instead.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, I don't have as much time. I'll give money. Right? I don't have the time to donate. Here's some money instead. I don't have money. Here's some time instead. Sorry, Dean, I cut you off there.
No. I'm just saying it is highly subjective. It's based on the person, and you also have a societal morality as well. Whether you want to impose, because we were talking about moral obligations, and whether society thinks that you're obligated to help out. As opposed to just you personally, whether you personally think that you're like the Seinfeld episode, right? They had a Good Samaritan law on the books where you have to help somebody.
Yeah, it kind of did. Yeah, that's it's like oxymoronic. And so I don't think it's fair to I think probably the most fair thing to say would be it's a self-imposed obligation. So it might be more fair.
Okay, I was about to ask you about that. You said self-imposed because now it sounds like some morals are subjective and some are objective.
Well, because
if you're saying it depends on a person.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that I think in sort of, and again, this is where it grinds into a high degree of subjectivity, because even if I take your stance of well-being, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then, do I have to do the most well-being I can? Well, I just have to give away everything.
So at the get-go, and this is a whole nother conversation, but at the get-go, this is where AAA made it very clear there is no ought. Because we still haven't solved Hume's is-ought problem, and I think that's kind of where we're at now, and that could be a whole episode of its own. I personally
and so
don't
I think
think
it's probably
true
most fair
altruism...
to say that if it's self-imposed, it might be more fair to adopt AAA's phraseology of virtuous. But virtuous to me almost sounds like, ho, I'm so virtuous, right?
Well, I mean, just think of like vices
negative
and
connotation
virtues,
that I associate with that.
When I think virtues, I think the vices and virtues. The goods, the bads, the uglies. But I mean, obviously the is-ought problem is a problem for a different day, and if you're interested and willing, I'd like to have you come back on and we could kind of talk about not only the is-ought problem when it comes to morality, but also altruism, because I don't personally, and I could be convinced otherwise, but I don't think true altruism is even possible.
It's funny. I think I've thought about this a little bit, and I think, and I'd also be curious and interested to have the conversation, but I think the closest that you get, and I think it's also somewhat species specific, is motherhood. And the reason I say species specific is that, like Dean knows, like I keep snakes, right? Snakes do not care for their young in any way, shape, or form, right? And it doesn't matter what kind of snake it is. If it's a cobra, it comes out with fangs and venom to take you out. It don't need no help. But crocodilians do care for their young. The mothers carry the babies around in their mouth. You want to fuck with a baby crocodile? Help yourself. You got to deal with mama, right? And I think humans do the same thing as well. I don't think I understand what it would take to like you think about how the mother would sacrifice its life, push the child out of the way of a car and have the car hit them. In my brain, I'm like, fuck, I want to just pick the kid up and keep running, right? That's where my brain goes. I don't think I have the capacity because I'm not wired the same way, right? I'm a father, but I don't have
very species
mothering instinct. I think it's a fascinating.
It is rather species specific, especially with humans, because humans especially are more willing to put their own lives at risk in favor of the child, whereas a lot of other species would let the child die because they can have more. Right? Like when a new lion comes and takes over a pride, he kills all the babies, brings the females into heat, and sires his own young. He's not going to put his energy and effort into protecting somebody else's kids. So he goes around and kills all the cubs, so he can make more. And the females try and stop him, but eventually all the babies die and the females make more kids.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think at least looking back on it, not trying to look back on it with rose-colored glasses, but I watched my mom. So my mom had me and 4 girls, 5 kids, right? And I watched my mom, like she was the strongest woman I've ever known. She was the first one out of bed in the morning, the last one to bed at night, and she did whatever she had to do to take care of her family. And she did that with no expectation of anything in return. And so that's how I view altruism. So I look at my mom as someone who's incredibly altruistic, taking care of her family, right? And I think that it's the mothers, and again, like Dean said it, I said it, like I think it's incredibly species specific, because you can point out there's probably more species that don't than do. Maybe it's more of a primate thing, although crocodilians do it. So I don't know. Maybe it's more of a primate thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I know, for instance, like sea turtles, they just lay eggs on the beach and then they're out. They're done.
They fuck off, yeah.
Galapagos tortoises are the same way. They have eggs and then they're gone. Never see them again. Particularly when you get to like mammals, you see a lot more protective traits of young, like even whales are really good like examples of that, especially because a pod of whales typically has like 1 to 2 calves at most, sometimes ever, and so mother whales are incredibly protective of their babies. Like it's insane. But yeah, I would say like it would be an interesting conversation to have a discussion on true altruism, because I don't know that I believe it's possible. However, I'm convinced I think I could be convinced. I will say that I think your example of motherhood is probably the closest we'll ever see within our species. And then just kind of as a final thought on that is just that, you know, the old cliche, a good deed is its own reward, right? And that's where my problem with altruism is that, you know, good deeds are self-rewarding.
That's entirely possible. Was my mom always thinking that she can, you know, kind of walk us down the street and say, look how well I take care of my kids? Well, who the fuck knows, right?
Yeah,
like I have no idea.
Obviously
She's been dead for
also too,
I have no idea.
Also too, she could be thinking that I sacrifice now so that in the future they'll be around to take care of me when I'm not able to take care of myself.
Yeah,
So you know what's interesting, and this gets in, like,
So that's a very interesting concept you just brought up. Does true altruism actually exist? It's a very interesting concept.
it is interesting. So I have to
I'm gonna say no.
Yeah, I have to take more of a personal side. So for example, when my mom died of cancer in well, I know you're going to, anyway, we tried, my wife and I talked. Dean, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but anyway, Dean's very he's over my place all the time. Anyway, family stuff.
I'd like to give you this last word. By the way, I'm gonna have to get ready to go.
Oh, okay, yeah. So we tried to bring my mom. So when my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, we're like, Mom, come, let us take care of, like what Fassad said, come, let's take care of you. And she's like, nope. She's like, I am not going to be a burden to my kids. And so she went to hospice. She would not allow us to take care of her. Mm-hmm. So that's why I had this. So that's why when I stick to the mothering thing, I have strong feelings because of personal experiences. I could still be wrong and you could still be right. My viewpoint is colored by my personal experience.
Yeah, fair enough. Last word.
The whole thing of you pushing your child out of the way of an oncoming car so that you're hit. You can't possibly think that there's going to be any future help for you, right?
Yeah, I guess that's true.
This is true.
I would say
you could look at it as like it's your own like ultimate personal sacrifice to do something, you know, not to quote scripture here, but to quote scripture here, no greater love than a man have than this, that he laid down his life for his friend, you know?
His friends, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, there's undoubtedly, I mean, AAA and I have known each other since we were 4 years old. We went to kindergarten all the way to high school and even to college together. And we talk on the phone pretty frequently now, even though we live about 500 miles apart. And there isn't much of a doubt in my mind that if somebody were to like pull a gun out on us on the street, that I wouldn't do anything I could to take the bullet for him, you know? But I couldn't even qualify that as a truly altruistic act. I know there's things that have come into play throughout my life that I know, even like if my life ended because of it, that I was doing it for at least somewhat of a selfish reason.
That's what I was gonna say. So you do it. Let's say we're talking about pushing a child out the way, right? So you get hit by the bus instead of the child. That's because you value the child more than you value yourself. All you're doing is protecting what you value. It's
interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting thought experiment for sure.
Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, I'd like to
last word.
thank you guys
you want
for
to say
coming on.
For Moat? I think we've hit the end of the morality road.
Yeah.
Are we still streaming for that? I'm sorry, are we still streaming?
Yeah, we're still streaming. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah,
I just unplugged my headphones. So.
Okay, you took them off. Yeah, to confuse me. Okay, yeah. So yeah, thank you guys for coming on. We'll definitely have you back on again. I like there were some things about morality that I wanted to get to, but we didn't necessarily have enough time. And so Yeah, definitely. And also, I'd like to get you back on to debate some of the Christian apologists that we find. I'd like to see just how you handle some of the questions that they ask. Like I enjoyed the conversation that you had with Wes, and so
yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation with Wes too, and thanks again so much for having us and having me back. Yeah, I mean, you can pretty much take it as a blanket yes. Just set some shit up and I'll be there.
Awesome.
You know, time, of course, permitting, right? You know, if just for full disclosure, we like to vacation. So if you set up my vacation, I'm not canceling the trip for you. But yeah, just set some shit up and I'll be there. I think it's great fun, and I want to say specifically, thank you. And and I mean this in a genuine way, not in a in any other, but for helping me sounds weird. Getting me to look at this a little bit differently. I like having my thoughts, and this is again for everybody else that's going to watch and listen to this.
Mhm.
It's okay to have your thoughts and feelings challenged. It's okay.
Yeah, man.
You're not going to get hurt.
Yeah.
You don't want to
whole
spend
point
your
of the
life in
show.
echo chamber. You need to have your ideas challenged.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
If all you
That's
ever
the
do is
whole
spend your
point.
time around people you believe that believe the same as you, that's fucking boring.
Agreed. It's the whole point of the show, baby. We appreciate it. We love having conversations like this. That's literally the foundation of what the show is about. It's just having conversations that A, aren't easy, that B, you don't necessarily agree identically with the person that you're having a conversation with, and that C, hopefully somebody walks away learning something or trying to looking at things in a different way. And that's why we have people on that have similar ideas or different ideas than us and just try to challenge our own ways to look at it. We didn't just walk in and say, like, oh, these are the way we've been forever. Congratulations, we know all the answers. It's come with trial and error, and it's been a fun journey, and we're going to keep it up because it's a fun one to do. But thank you guys both for coming on. It's awesome to have you. If you'd ever want to come back, please let us know. We'll be glad to have you. We'll try to set some stuff up between you and Apologist if you're interested, and some of the people we've had. And if there's anyone you'd like for us to talk to or come on your show, if that's something you're so inclined to do.
Oh yeah, no, we definitely want to have you guys on, and I think what will be really good is think about here's kind of what I'd like to try to do is think about some of these Christian apologists who have a slant on slavery, and I would love to and say like name drop, but I'll talk to Dr. Josh, who's an Assyriologist, who has his PhD in this stuff and has written books on biblical slavery, and I bet you I could probably coerce Josh into coming on to have a discussion with someone who thinks there's no such thing as slavery in the Bible.
Oh, definitely. That'd be dope.
Yeah,
Definitely. Love to get them on.
Thank you guys so much. We'll see you next week. I don't know who the guest is because I'm not good at this kind of stuff. I do the tech work. Fanatic. Former Christian rapper.